Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 22 of the Life in Norway show. Today I'm joined by Pame, a Mexican living in the Møre og Romsdal region of Western Norway. We talk about the popularity of her Spanish language YouTube channel about life in Norway, and the differences between lifestyle in Mexico and Scandinavia. You can find out more information, including links to things we mention, on the show notes page. Simply head on over to alifeinnorway.net/podcast and look for episode 22. Happy listening. Today I'm speaking to Pame, a Mexican living in Norway for around 6 years now, who runs the popular YouTube channel Pame Kusli, Mexicana en Noruega. At the time of writing, she has more than 25,000 subscribers, so her stories about life in Norway in Spanish reach a lot of people back home. Pame, bienvenida al podcast.
Gracias. I'm so excited to finally be here.
Absolutely. We've been chatting on Twitter for on and off for quite some time now, and your videos are ones that pop into my feed on YouTube quite regularly. Before we start talking about your YouTube channel and the kind of content you create, tell us what brought you to Norway in the first place.
Well, my education. In fact, I wanted to live in a Nordic country since I was little, perhaps around 5 or 6 years old. I remember that I was playing around and the TV was on and I saw a documentary about the Northern Lights. So in my curious mind, the first thing that I heard is, you can see the Northern Lights in Norway, Finland, Sweden. And I fell in love with them. So I immediately told my mom, I need to go to a library. And I started learning a lot about all of this and falling in love with the Nordic countries. So I knew from very young age that I wanted to be here. And little by little, I did all the research that I could. And sometimes I forgot about it because it was so complicated. But when I was about to graduate from my bachelor degree, I decided to look again. Why not? And I found an opportunity to do a double degree master program that was, I think it doesn't exist anymore, but it was between my school in Mexico and a university in Norway. And I applied without telling anybody. I did the exam. And I remember I was in the library when they called me and told me, you passed. The exam was very good. Your points were so good that you are going to get a scholarship. And can you imagine me telling my mother, Mama, guess what?
I'm really curious to know how that conversation went. I mean, you've told us what drew you to Norway in the first place, but what sort of perception of Norway and Scandinavia do people in Mexico and Latin America have?
To be honest, I think that I cannot really generalize, Latin America is a lot of different countries and cultures and history and different perceptions. I think that I cannot even generalize for all Mexico. But I think that perhaps a lot of people believes that most Norwegians are very cold because, of course, we as Latin American are very open and we laugh a lot and we are very touchy, And they might think that most Norwegians are very cold. And also, one thing that a lot of people tells me when they know that I live in Norway is that they think that Norway is cold the whole year, that we don't have summer or spring or something like that. So, I guess those might be some of the perceptions that people has.
Fair enough. How about the Vikings? I mean, I've noticed that you open your videos by saying "Hola Vikingos." Is that something that resonates back home?
Yeah, of course. I think one of the most famous things about the Nordic countries are the Vikings. So for me, the Vikings are very important because I love their history. I love to learn about their mythology, about their beliefs, about all the things that they did. And I feel that we have a wrong perception about them. Of course, people is always thinking that they were very violent and all of that, but people doesn't really know so well that they were merchants. that they were the first ones that were with the negotiations, that you can find a lot of findings from Middle East and other parts of the world around Norway and Denmark and Iceland. And you say, but how? Well, because the Vikings were dealing with those things. And also, another of the wrong perceptions that people might have is that they think that women were not participating at all, when, of course, we have the amazing, one of my favorite places in Norway, the Viking Ship Museum in Oslo. We have the amazing ship of Oseberg. And what do they found in the Oseberg? Well, they found two women in there, two very important ladies. So, yeah, for me, the Vikings are something fascinating. And yeah, a long time ago, talking with my subscribers, we decided that, yeah, we all are Vikings because we have the curiosity of traveling, the curiosity of going somewhere, probably not only physically, but at least visually, and learning about it. So, yeah.
Excellent. So, with these kind of perceptions of the Nordic countries, what has the reality been like? What are the biggest differences between life in Mexico and life in Norway?
First of all, Norway and Mexico are very different countries. When it comes from history, culture, society, I can say that in a funny way, perhaps one of the biggest differences is the bureaucracy. Because in Norway, most of the things can be done online. For example, in one of my videos, I talked with this Brazilian girl who opened her small business in Aalesund. She makes amazing design cakes. And she mentions how easy it was for her because she just did it online, some clicks, and wow, I'm registered and I have a business. But in Mexico, if you want to do things like that, you have to be prepared to bring thousands of papers, printed papers in your hands. They will send you from one place to another. They will have for you to make copies and more copies and more copies and wait for months to do things. So I think that's one of the biggest differences that I have found, perhaps.
I completely understand because as regular listeners will know, my partner is also from Mexico, and I joined him in the queue to renew a driving license a couple of years ago, and that was an experience. I thought it would be, go along, give one form into a desk, and then that would be it. But no, there was 3 or 4 different desks. You had to pay at one counter, wait, get something stamped, then go to another, then get this form completed, go back to another desk. And it just went on and on forever. And I couldn't understand the point at all. But I think maybe in Norway, it's the other way around. It's almost too easy sometimes.
Yeah, and I think Mexico needs to digitalize more their processes. Because, of course, another thing you can notice are the banks. If you go to a bank in Norway, probably you will not find a queue. But in Mexico, you have to be prepared to go before 8 in the morning, before they open, so you can be one of the first ones in line, because if not, you're going to spend most likely all your evening, all your morning in there.
Okay, so that's bureaucracy, banking, forms and things like that. What else have you seen are the biggest differences between life here and life in Mexico?
Well, I guess the food too, because in Mexico we use a lot of condiments, and in here it's quite difficult to find many ingredients to make real Mexican food. Of course, if you live in Oslo, you can find way more things. Or now that they have the amazing tortillas in Stavanger that they use to open the new Como Mexico tortilleria is fantastic. But other than that, it's so difficult to make real Mexican food in here. And the Norwegian food is not bad at all, but it's different. I think probably I will put more lime because I use a lot of lemons, But yeah, and when it comes to society, for example, my perception might be different from other people's perception because, as we stated at the beginning, I started my introduction to the Norwegian society in a university. Therefore, most of the Norwegian people that I met has already had an international background or an international relation, They are more open to that. So it was not really that difficult to be making friends or to be introduced to the Norwegian culture. But I can completely understand. I have some friends that they didn't came to study. They came to live here to work. And they have mentioned that for them it has been a bit more difficult. And I think it is because Norwegian people normally grow together since they are children, and they become very close, and they have their nucleus of people. What's the name of nucleo in English? I forgot the word.
Nucleus of people.
Yeah, you know. Wow, yeah. Sorry. Well, they just grow up very close to each other. And therefore, sometimes it's a bit difficult, like to open a space for you to be integrated in that circle. But once you are in, you are in.
A common complaint I hear from people is that it's very difficult to make friends in Norway with Norwegians. It's not so difficult to make friends with other international people. So how have you managed over the last 6 years? Do you have any top tips for people looking to befriend a Norwegian?
Yes, it has been difficult now that I lived in a small village. Because, like I said before, most people already knows each other very well. But for example, since I'm actually in a Norwegian family, because my husband is Norwegian, that has helped a lot because, of course, I get introduced to his friends or to family friends. But for example, if you come here and you don't really know anybody, I think that you should try to involve yourself in activities. If you like running, you could join to the running club. If you like reading, you could go to the Café Språk that they organize. If you like whatever thing, there are many clubs that you could join, or you could be, for example, frivillig in certain places where you're going to find many Norwegians. So I think that in that way, by sharing your interests with other person, you can open a door of communication with them. Or for example, you know, they organize a dugnad. If they organize a dugnad, go join them, because they will see, like, look, this person is coming and is integrating, is doing, and you might get to know your neighbors in that way, for example. You cannot really expect for them to come and knock on your door, you know?
Sure. I think one of the most, the biggest social lubricants almost here in Norway is food. And you've already mentioned that food is one of the biggest differences. But as you have a Norwegian husband, I'm really curious to know, do you eat tacos on Fridays? And if you do, are they Norwegian taco or are they Mexican tacos?
Well, I guess it depends a lot if we can find tortillas or flour to make real Mexican tortillas. But no, we don't really have that taco Fredag tradition in our house. But I can say that our meals are quite mixed. It's not really like, oh, today we're going to make Mexican food. It's more about, what do I want to eat today? Or do we have time to do this? So, yeah, sometimes we make a mix of Mexican, Norwegian food the same day. Or
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Having a Norwegian husband, did that make learning Norwegian easy, or did you still find it a bit of a challenge?
Well, I think it could be a challenge because, in a way, if you are living together, you most of the times are not going to take your time to be wasting it, we could say, in a way. That's a bad word in this case. But sometimes you want to fix things fast. So you will speak in English just to fix things fast. I think that the most important thing to do is to try to establish like a schedule, to say, perhaps every week we are going to speak only Norwegian 5 hours, 1 hour a day. Or in his case, we're going to speak in Spanish only for 1 hour or something. Because, of course, I always believe that if you are in an intercultural relationship, of course I need to learn your language, but you need to learn mine too. It has to be an exchange. And also, I took 600 hours of Norwegian.
600 hours?
Yes,
wow.
Of course. I had to take 600 hours of Norwegian. And when we are at home, I think that we make an interesting mix of Spanglish, Nor-English. But actually, I'm going to make a bit of self-promotion, a small plug right here.
Sure.
I have a video that I think is very interesting of this Finnish woman that is making her post-doctorate studies on international communication, you know, and intercouples, you know. We were part of it, and I think it's very interesting. This study has been taken for 5 years already. in the first phase, for example, she gave us a recorder. Yeah, is that the name? Where we were just, for example, in a normal setting, just turn it on and eat and talk, just like forget that this thing is on. And then she will analyze our conversation. She will realize, okay, are you creating new words, or which language are you using the most? Or how is the communication flowing? Or which kind of topics are you talking about? And that was like I said, like 5 years ago. And then again, we did another interview last year where she was sending us again the things to record, to see how the language has been evolving, how our communication has been evolving. I think it's a very interesting topic.
That does sound fascinating, genuinely fascinating. I assume those videos are on you've done a video about that on your YouTube channel?
Yes, I actually interviewed her because I thought, if you're coming to my house to do this interview, I'm going to interview you too about it too.
Well, we'll definitely include that video in the show notes, which you'll be able to find at lifeinnorway.net/podcast. I really am genuinely interested in finding out a little bit more about that study. On that note, what language do you use on a day-to-day basis with your husband?
We are mixing it all the time. There are some times that we find ourselves speaking in Norwegian, and then suddenly in English, and then suddenly a whole sentence becomes with 3 languages, and we can completely understand. But of course, when we are in a social situation, it depends a lot of the people. With my family, my Norwegian family, I speak, we could say 85-90% Norwegian.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Pame, now you're settled in Western Norway in the Møre og Romsdal region, which is kind of in and around Aalesund for those that know Norway. What is it like to live in that part of the world?
I think it's fantastic. It's a very calm place. Aalesund is not really a big city, or well, if you compare it to the place where I come from, the whole Mexico, if you compare it with Norway is very small. But anyways, Aalesund is a very beautiful little city that reaches its peak on summer when all the cruise ships come and thousands of people arrive. But during the winter days, it's so lovely, in my opinion. I don't know if you know this, but Aalesund has a very interesting story because in 1904, they had a huge fire that destroyed almost everything. Almost all the city center was destroyed except by one house, which is known as the Miracle House. The story of that house is amazing to me because they say that it was this guy with his wife, and that he dreamed a couple of days before that an angel came to him and told him, when the fire comes, don't go outside, stay here. And you might think that's crazy. If your house is wood, it's made out of wood and it's fire, you go outside. But he was believing so much that he didn't went outside. And that was the only house that was not burned, which is crazy to me. And you can actually visit the house. It's still there. It's now a museum. The interesting thing about all of this is that they decided to gather a lot of architects from around Europe. And they thought, well, perhaps we need to do something about it because if it's wood again, it might burn again. So they decided to make everything with cement and mortar and things that will resist. And because of the time period, it was fashionable to do things in Art Nouveau style. So they decided to build everything in Art Nouveau style. And nowadays, that's one of the things that makes Aalesund more famous, all the buildings in Art Nouveau. So yeah, it's like I said, it's a very small city, but it has very beautiful buildings and very beautiful things.
It is a beautiful place to walk around, and it does feature, or the area certainly around Aalesund does feature in many of your videos. So I think I'd like to find out a little bit more about your videos. Why did you start the YouTube channel?
Well, as I mentioned before, I wanted to come to a Nordic country since I was very little. And while doing all my research, I realized there was not so many information available, or most of it was in English. And it was not really about how to come here or how life was in here, but more like interesting facts about Norway. So I thought, why not to make a video or something that could help somebody else that is in the same situation that I am. I actually tried to start this channel when I was still in the university in Bergen, because I did my two first years in Norway. I was in Bergen in the university. And we tried, and the video was horrible, and we were like, perhaps no. But then I tried again, and it was so much better. You know, of course, at the beginning, you get a bit scared and you don't talk so openly, or you're very nervous about it. And yeah, I decided to start my YouTube channel because I wanted to share my life, my experiences, and the knowledge that I have gathered around in all these 7 years, because you said 6, 7. Because I thought people might find it interesting and useful. And I wanted to create a bridge of understanding between both nations, or between the Spanish-speaking part of the world, you know?
7 years is an impressive time. It's roughly how long I've been in Norway as well. And I know how difficult it's been to grow a website and now a podcast. And I can only imagine how difficult it's been to grow a YouTube channel to as many as 25,000 subscribers. So congratulations. Now, I know one possible reason, if my experience running a website is anything to go by, is you've probably got a few videos that have been really, really popular, and that has given your channel a boost. So can you talk a little bit about some of your most popular videos and what they were?
Well, in my channel, I make videos about many different subjects. Like I said, I like to touch everything that is possible. From blogs about our daily life, interviews with local people where we go to their place or work. We talk about their work, their passion, their interests, and so on. We make travel blogs, story time videos where I talk about my personal experiences here. We visit universities, museums. We make videos about Nordic mythology or teaching basic Norwegian because people want to learn. We also make a lot of collaboration with other Mexicans that live around the world, which I think is pretty interesting because we can compare the experiences, and we can learn a little bit about other cultures. And I think that my most watched video is one where I ask some Norwegians on the street of Aalesund, what do they think about Mexicans, or what was their perception about Mexico, which was very fun to do because that specific day was snowing so much that, of course, people doesn't really want to stop, you know, they just want to walk. And it was very fun to see and to learn what the people think, the first thing that comes to their mind when you see the word Mexico.
Is that a video that's done in English or in Norwegian?
I don't remember. I think some parts were in English and some parts were in Norwegian.
Yeah. Well, perhaps we can pop that in the show notes. I'm just thinking that a lot of people are going to be interested now in checking out your videos, but I imagine a lot of people aren't Spanish speakers. So do you have many videos that are in English or in Norwegian?
Yeah, of course. Actually, most of the videos where we interview people are in English.
Okay.
And all of them have subtitles. But for example, one of my videos that I'm more proud about is one where we went to NTNU in Aalesund, because many people want to come to study to Norway, and I wanted to make a video that was as useful as possible with all the questions that I could gather, because I get not thousands, that's exaggerating, but I get tons of questions about things like that. And I actually contacted the people from NTNU, and they invited us to collaborate and to go there. So yeah, we have also made interviews with a sheep breeder. Yeah, you know, a farmer. And we have visited people that makes glass blowing things. We have spoken with the mayor of Aalesund. We have spoken with the head of Free Aalesund, which is a very cool organization that is trying to work towards the equality of the LGBT community. And we have done a lot of those kind of interviews with local people, and all of them are mostly in English.
Okay, so where do you get your ideas from? And once you have decided, yeah, this is the video we're going to make next, what goes into making the video in terms of time and effort, and how long does it take?
Well, First of all, I try to make a video about a topic that I will like. If I think if I'm liking it, I will enjoy making it, and I can transmit to other people that love or that interest that I have. Second of all, now that I have a bigger audience, people ask a lot of questions. And thanks to those questions, I can sometimes think, oh, perhaps I could talk about this, or I could talk about other thing. Also, well, what goes into making a video? A lot of work, a lot of work. I feel like when you are a YouTube consumer, you don't really understand. You just skip until all the video and whatever. But you don't put yourself in the shoes of the person that is creating all of this. For example, in my case, first of all, I have to think of an idea, and depending on that idea is the plan of action. For example, like I said before, I wanted to make a video that could be one of the most complete guides to study in a university in Norway. Like I said, I gathered all the questions that I could, I added another questions, and then I tried to make a contact with the people. And try to make the contact with somebody is not that easy. It's not that easy. Sometimes they might say no or might say yes. And in that point is when you realize, well, if they say no, do I still make the video? Or how can you change it, no? But then there's another way, which is if I want to speak about a specific topic, like mythology, traditions, history, and so on, what we do is to do the best research that is possible, from internet to books. And one of the cool advantages that we have is that we can look for the information in Spanish and English and Norwegian, and then we complement it all. And therefore, we can create videos that are more accurate, more reliable, and more interesting. Once we have that information, most of the times I like to write a small script because I like to gather all the ideas so I don't forget to mention anything. And once I have that small script is when I film, you know. Then there's another kind of videos because it's not the same, you know. The other kind of videos are, for example, when I make daily life vlogs or when I do story times. Those videos are not really scripted at all. They are more spontaneous, and therefore it's a little bit easier to create them. But once you have that idea of what you want to do is when you start the filming process. Sometimes I film in my small studio in my home. I have a small studio, come on. And some other times we find a location that could be interesting or related with the topic of the video. For example, I remember we made a video about, I don't remember exactly the story of mythology, and we were looking around for a river where we could make a small reenaction of, I think it was the Fossegrim, because the Fossegrim, if you give him a piece of meat, he will help you. And I had my husband throwing a rock or something, you know, like making a small recreation for the video to make it also more fun and not only just to be me speaking and speaking. So once you actually find the location and start filming, then it comes one of the most important parts, which is the post-production. The post-production is hours and hours and hours in front of your computer, selecting the best shots, trying to fix the audio, the light, editing the video, adding the subtitles. Oh my God, the subtitles take hours and hours. And all those things that are needed. After that, you put your video to render. That also takes a lot of hours. And if you're lucky, it won't crash. Then once it's ready, you just upload it.
That is quite the story. I mean, Life in Norway has a YouTube channel. It has 85 subscribers. It's not quite the 25,000 that you have. But, you know, up until now, I've only really put out the podcast episodes as just an audio file. But I did a little experiment on the recent trip where I did a boat tour of the Hurtigruten ship that I was on. And it was my first attempt at making a YouTube video. And it certainly took a long time once I'd filmed, you know, the content that I wanted, and I sat down ready to do the editing. That took forever. So I can, and it was a relatively short video, maybe a couple minutes long. So I can only imagine the effort that goes into some of the videos I've seen of yours. It must be essentially a full-time job.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Okay, Pame, we've been chatting, believe it or not, for around half an hour now. So it's time to wrap things up, and that's with the 3 questions that I ask all guests here on the Life in Norway show. So short answers, please. What's the best thing about living in Norway?
Well, I don't think I could choose only one thing. There are many aspects that I like, from being able to be with a person I love to the amazing nature and the tranquility, perhaps.
Okay. What do you find most challenging about life in Norway?
Being far away from my family, of course. When you live abroad, it is one of the most difficult things that you have to face. And you have to accept and understand that you won't be able to be next to them in every important situation. The bad things can happen, and they won't be on your control. I think that you need to learn to do your best and just to adapt to those circumstances.
I think that's a great answer. It's something that not enough of us actually talk about when it comes to living abroad. And you've given me an idea for an article there, because it is really tough, especially it's maybe okay in the first year or so, but when you've been away for the length of time that we have, 6-7 years, and you start to miss weddings, funerals, births, and really important occasions like that, it can really take its toll over the long term. So that's a really good answer. Thank you. Final question. What's your favourite place in Norway, whether that's a whole town or a tiny little spot somewhere special?
Well, I cannot really choose one. I love the whole city of Bergen, the Vikings Museum in Oslo, like I already said, the Nidarosdomen in Trondheim, and a very small lighthouse that is not so far away from our house, where I go to meditate because not many people goes there. But come on, there are still many places in Norway that I want to visit. In fact, my dream is to be able to travel all around Norway and document my experiences while doing so.
Fantastic. Well, that's a dream we both share, and we're both in process of making. Pame, where can followers of the Life in Norway show find out more about your videos and see some of your adventures, albeit in Spanish?
Well, you can follow me on YouTube in the channel Pame Koselig, Mexicana en Noruega, and Instagram or Twitter, you can find me in Pame_Koselig. And then you can also find me in mexicanaennoruega.com, mexicanaennoruega.com, which is our new website that we just started this year. And of course on Facebook in Pame Koselig, Mexicana en Noruega.
Fantastic. Well, there will be links to all of those places in the show notes. You can find those at lifeinnorway.net/podcast. Pame, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope I didn't make too many mistakes.